Their connection was immediate, electric, undeniable. Both had known loneliness at the top. Both understood the emptiness behind applause. For the first time in years, Keith felt seen. He started writing differently, softer, more hopeful. The songs no longer came from pain, but from the possibility of healing. Love became both muse and medicine. But the past doesn't vanish because the future looks beautiful. As their love deepened, his addiction lingered, a jealous ghost. Even while falling in love, he was falling apart. When Nicole looked at me, he said, I saw a version of myself that might still be saved. She gave me the courage, he added, to stop surviving and start living. By 2006, Keith Urban stood at the crossroads of heaven and hell, one hand holding a guitar, the other holding redemption. That year, Sydney glowed like a cathedral built for love. The world's eyes turned to St. Patrick's Estate, where candles flickered and violins sang beneath the stars. Keith waited at the altar, hands trembling, heart racing, as Nicole Kidman, radiant in lace and calm faith, walked toward him. Their wedding wasn't just a union, it was a prayer answered. Two souls bruised by fame, healed by tenderness, finally home. When he kissed her, it felt less like ceremony and more like forgiveness. The church was silent except for the sound of his heartbeat, steady, thundering, as Nicole Kidman, radiant in lace and quiet faith, walked down the aisle. Their wedding was more than a ceremony. It felt like a prayer answered. Two people, worn by fame yet healed by tenderness, had finally found home. When Keith kissed her, it wasn't performance. It was peace. In the years that followed, life unfolded like a melody in a major key. Keith's album Love, Pain, and the Whole Crazy Thing landed perfectly in rhythm with that new chapter. Critics called it his masterpiece, a mix of confession and triumph. Each song, from Stupid Boy to You Look Good in My Shirt, carried the weight of a man learning to forgive himself. On stage, he was unstoppable. His concerts felt almost spiritual, each audience like a congregation. What the world saw was the charm, the confidence, the charisma. What they didn't see were the whispered prayers before every show, the tremor in his hands, the daily battle to stay balanced. Nicole's career, too, reached new heights. Roles in Moulin Rouge, The Hours, Australia, and Rabbit Hole proved her range. A performer both delicate and powerful. Yet behind the spotlight, she stayed grounded. In Nashville, she found calm, and she found him. Their home echoed with music, laughter, and family. On Sundays, Nicole would sit barefoot on the porch while Keith played guitar, their daughters Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret dancing on the grass. They were no longer just stars. They were partners, parents, learning the rhythm of ordinary joy. But love under fame is never simple. Success magnifies everything, both beauty and strain. Keith toured endlessly while Nicole filmed across continents. Their schedules moved like tides, pulling them in and out of each other's lives. They called daily, left messages that began with, "I miss you," and ended in silence. Love, Keith once said, isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, even when you're exhausted. There are confessions that don't sound like apologies, but like quiet hymns. Keith Urban's came softly, wrapped in the calm dignity of a man who has lived long enough to watch his own reflection change. At 57, sitting alone in a Nashville studio with the lights dimmed to gold, he finally spoke about love. Not the kind that sells records, but the kind that breaks you and then rebuilds you, until you no longer need the illusion of forever. For decades, he had been the smiling golden boy of country music. Blue eyes, leather boots, and a voice that made heartbreak sound beautiful. To the world, he was the dreamer who conquered America and captured the heart of Nicole Kidman, Hollywood's porcelain queen. They seemed like destiny itself. Two stars drawn together across continents, both marked by fame, both searching for peace. But fame has a way of turning love into performance. It takes something sacred and puts it under glass, asking it to survive without air. Keith and Nicole had been married for nearly 20 years. a rare miracle in a world that often consumes its idols. From red carpets to award shows, they looked inseparable. Yet, behind every smile, there was a quiet tremor, an unseen cost. Every note he sang on stage carried the weight of nights spent apart. Every applause struck the echo of a heart missing home. He would later admit that even in front of sold-out arenas, he sometimes felt trapped inside a cage made of sound. Fame, he once said, isn't freedom. It's just a louder kind of loneliness. So when Keith finally spoke the truth about his marriage, it wasn't scandal that followed. It was grace. I loved her more than I knew how to, he confessed. And sometimes love changes shape. It doesn't die. It just stops needing to prove itself. The world expected drama, betrayal, heartbreak, a story fit for headlines. What they got instead was honesty. A man explaining what it means to love in the long shadow of perfection. His story of rise, demons, devotion, and renewal isn't just about one marriage. It's about the evolution of a soul learning to stay open, even after being fractured by fame. It's about the small-town boy from Caboolture who only wanted to play guitar and learned that every chord of success carries a note of sacrifice. At 57, Keith Urban no longer chases applause. He chases truth. He's not singing to be adored. He's singing to be understood. And as he strums his guitar in that quiet Nashville studio, you can hear it, the sound of a man who stopped performing for the world and started speaking to eternity. This isn't the story of a fall from grace. It's the story of a man who finally chose to live without pretending. And this moment, right here, is where the melody begins. A confession wrapped in music. A truth that took a lifetime to find. Long before the spotlight found him, before Nashville, before the stadiums chanted his name, there was a boy, sitting cross-legged on the rough carpet of a small Australian home, tracing the frets of a guitar with trembling fingers. The air smelled of dust and eucalyptus. Outside, cicadas sang as if keeping time for him. Inside, Keith Lionel Urban, son of Robert and Mary Ann, was learning that music could be both an escape and a mirror. He was born in Whangarei, New Zealand on October 26, 1967, but grew up in Caboolture, a quiet working-class town in Queensland. His father sold instruments part-time. His mother loved country records. Their home pulsed with the heartbeat of American sound. Glenn Campbell, Don Williams, Merle Haggard. Voices from faraway places drifting through the walls like sermons for a restless child. Keith didn't just hear songs. He saw them. The stories, the ache, the grit. They taught him that even ordinary lives could sound extraordinary if played right. At 4, he picked up a ukulele. At 6, a guitar. His father told him, "If you want the world to listen, make it feel you." And Keith did. He practiced until his fingers blistered, then practiced more. When he couldn't afford new strings, he made the broken ones sing. Each evening, their small living room became a stage. His parents clapped. Neighbors listened through thin walls. He wasn't dreaming of fame yet, only of belonging, of finding a place where the music inside him matched the world outside. School was harder. He was shy, awkward, sometimes teased for his accent or his obsession with American cowboy songs. While others played rugby, he memorized guitar solos. Teachers called him distracted. Classmates called him strange. But the strings never judged him. They became his first true friends. Music, he once said, was the only language I didn't stutter in. By 9, he was performing in local talent shows, singing country covers with a voice too gentle for his age, yet too sincere to ignore. Judges smiled. His parents beamed. But even after winning, Keith went home, replayed every mistake, every missed note, determined to be better. That perfectionism, both his gift and his burden, began early. When he was 12, his father mortgaged their modest home to buy him a professional guitar. It was a bold, maybe reckless gesture of faith. "Make it count," his father said. Keith never forgot. He spent hours after school watching Chet Atkins videos, copying every lick until his hands cramped. While his friends chased girls, he chased tone. The guitar became his sanctuary, a refuge from everything he couldn't explain about the world. By 15, he was playing in local bars, the youngest musician in smoky rooms filled with laughter and regret. Too young to drink, too old to dream. Night after night, he sang for half-interested strangers who clapped out of habit more than admiration. Yet, even then, he performed like the universe was listening. "You learn who you are on those nights," he later said. "You learn whether you're doing this for love or applause." It was in those dim pubs that Keith found the first fragments of himself, the poet hidden inside the performer. He learned to make sadness sound beautiful, to turn longing into melody, and silence into rhythm. Every chord he struck was rebellion, against smallness, against invisibility. He wasn't running away from home. He was running toward the life he believed was waiting for him somewhere far beyond the horizon. When the final school bell rang and his friends drifted toward steady jobs and ordinary lives, Keith packed a suitcase, a guitar, and a map full of possibility. He kissed his mother's cheek, hugged his father, and whispered, "I'll make it worth it." Then he left Caboolture with nothing but faith. Faith that music could keep him from disappearing. He didn't yet know it would save him again and again, from loneliness, from failure, and from himself. Nashville, the word alone sounded like prophecy to a boy from Caboolture, the promised land, where people turned pain into poetry and called it country music. But when Keith Urban arrived there in 1992, the dream looked different up close. It wasn't golden, it was gritty, humbling, and hard. He was 24, broke, and unknown. The streets overflowed with musicians chasing the same miracle. Every bar, every open mic was a battlefield of hope. He slept in cheap apartments with paper-thin walls where the hum of air conditioners mixed with the hum of guitars. He recorded demos for other artists, played backup for singers who barely noticed him, and more than once sold his instruments to pay rent. But even when money ran out, the music didn't. He carried it like oxygen. "It's not ambition that keeps you alive," he said. "It's hunger, pure hunger." Those early years in Nashville were a trial by fire. He formed a band called The Ranch, 3 men bound by desperation and a shared dream. They played smoky bars, county fairs, anywhere that paid in beer or applause. Crowds were small, often indifferent, but Keith played every note like he was already famous. The nights blurred, loading gear at dawn, writing songs in motel rooms, staring at leaky ceilings. When exhaustion came, he drowned it in whiskey, a habit that started small but grew heavy. Loneliness on the road can make false friends seem loyal, and for Keith, the bottle became one of them. Then, after nearly a decade of struggle, came the breakthrough. In 1999, his self-titled American debut Keith Urban hit the radio like a revelation. His voice was different, not twangy like traditional country, not polished like pop, but raw, honest, and electric. Songs like "But for the Grace of God" and "Where the Blacktop Ends" became anthems for dreamers who were tired of pretending. Critics called him the new face of country. What they really meant was, he made it feel human again. Fame flickered at the edges. The ACM named him Top New Male Vocalist. The CMA gave him the Horizon Award. He smiled, but inside he was afraid. For the first time, he had something to lose. The same industry that once ignored him now expected perfection. Every lyric was examined, every show judged. The applause grew louder, but so did the pressure. He spent sleepless nights chasing that unique blend of country grit and rock soul that only he could deliver. But fame, like fire, always needs fuel. When inspiration ran low, he turned back to the bottle. The same passion that lit him up on stage began to consume him off it. He laughed louder, partied harder, worked longer, trying to silence the doubt whispering that he didn't deserve it. Then came the night that changed everything. Los Angeles, 2005, a charity gala shining with stars. And then, through the crowd, walked Nicole Kidman. She was elegance wrapped in quiet sadness, a mix of strength and vulnerability. He introduced himself with a shy grin. She smiled back, warm and open. She didn't see the fame, Keith would later say. She saw the man. Then came the headlines. Only 4 months after their wedding, Keith Urban enters rehab. It wasn't failure. It was surrender. The pressure, the fear of losing control had become unbearable. Nicole didn't walk away. She ran toward him. Quietly, she visited, protecting his privacy and refusing interviews. When asked later why she stayed, she simply said, "Because love doesn't run." Months later, Keith emerged sober, humbled, not broken. "She saved my life," he admitted, "not by fixing me, but by believing in me." His next records, Defying Gravity and Get Closer, carried that gratitude in every lyric. These weren't albums, they were thank you notes set to music. Proof that love and recovery could coexist. For years, they appeared invincible again, hand in hand on red carpets, eyes still reflecting their wedding night. Yet, beneath the perfection was the quiet reality of long relationships. Seasons of distance, doubts, and small fractures fame loves to expose. The more they guarded their privacy, the louder the world speculated. But through it all, they stayed united, anchored by an unspoken promise. We won't let the noise define us. In public, they smiled. In private, they endured. They learned that love isn't constant happiness. It's grace under pressure. "I don't want to be the man the world loves," Keith once said. "I want to be the man she believes in." For years, he was. But even the brightest flame dims beneath constant scrutiny. As time passed, a different quiet settled. Not absence, but evolution. A softness that asked, what happens when the fairy tale grows older than the dream itself? Their story didn't collapse in drama. There were no fights, no betrayal, just the slow drift that comes when two lives begin to move at different tempos. The public saw the smiles and red carpets. Behind them were silences and missed calls. The distance wasn't measured in miles, though there were plenty, but in the spaces between words. Nicole's projects took her across London, Paris, and New York. Keith's tours spanned America, each stadium cheer replacing conversation. When together, they were gentle but formal. Apart, they texted politely, careful with words. They still cared deeply, but love had turned into routine. Friends noticed first. At gatherings, Keith spoke proudly of his daughters and his music, but rarely of them. Nicole, ever graceful, would smile and say, "We're both very busy," Hollywood's quiet code for something deeper. Still, there was no bitterness, no hostility, only respect and affection stretched thin. Then came the rumors, questions about distance and change. He appeared alone at ceremonies. She skipped tours. The tabloids wrote their stories. But the truth was far simpler. Two kind people trying to preserve something that fame had slowly reshaped. Marriage isn't a promise that time won't change you, Keith reflected in one interview. It's the hope that you'll keep changing together. But life doesn't always stay in sync. Keith found refuge in quieter music, acoustic sessions, stripped of flash, filled with honesty. Songs like We Were and Parallel Line sounded less like hits and more like journal entries. Nicole poured herself into her craft, channeling introspection into roles that mirrored her own emotions. Her raw, haunting performance in Big Little Lies felt deeply personal. Art reflecting life. Both came to understand that not every love ends in chaos. Sometimes it just exhales, softly, naturally. The fiery passion that once pulled them together had mellowed into something gentle and distant. They weren't adversaries, just evolving into separate selves. By his mid-50s, Keith spoke more of peace than passion. "Love changes," he said. "You can fight to keep it what it was, or love it enough to let it become what it needs to be." His words carried calm, not regret, not relief, just acceptance. By 2023, the silence was impossible to ignore. Fewer public appearances, fewer interviews, fewer photographs of intertwined hands. They weren't hiding, they were simply living a quieter truth. In a rare interview, Nicole was asked if they were still together. She smiled softly and said, "He will always be my family. That's all I'll ever say." It was both a farewell and a tribute. For Keith, family became sacred, his foundation, his focus, his faith. The story didn't end in tragedy, but in transformation. The quiet beauty of letting go with dignity. There was no villain, no broken vows, just two people who had walked as far together as they could, grateful for every step. To the world, it may have looked like an ending. To Keith, it was something else, a closing song without a final note. Some loves don't fade. They simply change shape, and if they made you better, they never truly end. And with that, Keith Urban turned the page on a chapter that made him both the man and the music we know today. When the noise faded and the headlines found new names to chase, Keith Urban remained, quieter, steadier, changed. The man, once defined by bright lights and roaring crowds, began to crave something different. Silence. Not emptiness, but stillness. For the first time since childhood, he could hear the space between the notes. He could breathe without applause. In that calm, Keith began to understand what all the chaos had tried to teach him. When asked about Nicole, he spoke softly. "We walked through a lot of fire, and sometimes walking out of the fire doesn't mean walking away from each other. It just means you've learned what the flames were trying to show you." His words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded lived. Now, in his late 50s, Keith had stopped running. From himself, from expectations, from perfection. He no longer needed to be the flawless husband, the polished artist, or the man defined by recovery. He only needed to be human. In interviews, he spoke with honesty about a new kind of struggle. Not with addiction, but with his own expectations. "When you're young, you think success will fix everything," he said. "Then you get it, and it only makes your fears louder." For years, he thought love would complete him. Now he knew love was never meant to complete anyone. It was meant to reveal who we are before the world told us who to be. The truth, he said, was never about betrayal or failure. It was more universal. During one concert, voice trembling, he admitted, "I used to think love was about holding on. Now I think it's about knowing when to let go, and still wishing them peace." The crowd fell silent. It wasn't performance, it was confession. That realization shaped his new music. His later songs shed their polish and returned to simplicity and soul. In The Hard Way Home, he sang about forgiveness without names, about healing without denial. Fans felt it immediately. This was not the Keith Urban of wild anthems and love-fueled energy. This was a man who had lived long enough to know that peace often follows surrender. Even though Nicole was no longer beside him in the same way, her presence lingered in his words. They co-parented gracefully, celebrated milestones together, and exchanged warm smiles when paths crossed. When asked about her, he always answered with gratitude, "She believed in me when I couldn't." That kind of love doesn't disappear, it just changes its color. Keith began speaking about what he called emotional sobriety, the idea that healing isn't just avoiding what harms you, but learning to live without needing to escape. The hardest addiction to break, he said, is control, the belief that you can shape life exactly how you want. You can't. You just have to keep showing up honestly every day. The truth was simple. Keith Urban had stopped performing to survive. Every lyric, every word, every show became an act of presence. He wasn't chasing validation anymore. He was practicing devotion. Not to fame, not even to love, but to life itself. "I used to think happiness was applause," he said quietly in one interview. "Now I think it's being able to go home, sit with yourself, and not need anyone to tell you who you are." That became his new gospel. Quiet, steady, hard-won. In Nashville, people described him differently now. Lighter, calmer. He still laughed easily, still joked, still played with passion, but his music carried serenity. the sound of a storm finally learning to rest. When he sang, it wasn't to prove he'd survived. It was to remind others they could too, and maybe that was his truest revelation. That the miracle of Keith Urban's story wasn't fame, or even love. It was forgiveness, for the past, for his mistakes, for the boy who once thought happiness only existed on a stage. At 57, Keith Urban had become the quiet man behind the legend. His fame had softened, but his inner light remained steady. He had walked through addiction, adoration, marriage, loss, and rediscovery, and emerged not bitter, but thankful. He no longer called what happened with Nicole a heartbreak. He called it a season. Some people think love ends when it changes, he said once. But love doesn't die. It becomes memory. It becomes gratitude. They still spoke often, still laughed about old moments, still shared milestones with their daughters. Sometimes they were seen together, smiling, not pretending, just at peace. They had rewritten what forever meant. During his final tour before taking a long break, Keith ended each show with an unreleased song. Just him and his guitar, no lights or band. He called it Still Here. The lyrics were simple and raw. I've broken in half just to learn how to bend. I've lost what I loved just to love it again. And if the world forgets my name or my song, I'll still be here, where I've belonged all along. Each night, as he sang those words, the crowd fell silent. No cheers, no noise, just a shared heartbeat of people who understood. When the final show ended, Keith didn't say goodbye. He simply walked off stage, handed his guitar to a crew member, and disappeared into the quiet behind the curtains. Outside, the Nashville night waited, soft, familiar. He looked up at the same sky that had watched him arrive decades earlier, young and terrified. He breathed deeply, feeling small again, and free. Later that year, during a calm interview on a candlelit porch, a journalist asked him, "After everything, the fame, the love, the loss, what do you think it all means?" Keith paused, watching fireflies drift across the Tennessee night. "It's all just music, isn't it?" he said. "The mistakes, the miracles, they're all part of the same song. You just have to keep playing." He smiled, then added softly, "And if you're lucky, someone you once loved will still be humming it too." The camera lingered on his face, lined by time, softened by peace. For a moment, he looked almost translucent, like a spirit halfway between past and calm. Behind him, the wind stirred through the trees, carrying a faint melody that felt eternal. As the screen faded to black, his voice echoed one last time, gentle and timeless. "Every song I ever wrote was just my way of saying, 'I'm still here.'" That was the truth he had finally reached. Not scandal, not sorrow, but serenity. Not the end of love, but its transformation. The boy who once dreamed of Nashville had found something far greater than fame or forgiveness. He found stillness. And in that stillness, Keith Urban remains, not as an idol, not as a myth, but as a man who turned wounds into music, silence into peace, and love into something that will never stop singing.